Hello and welcome to your second episode of Fisher's Class Notes, Unit 1, Section 1, Episode 2. Today we're going to focus on the geography of North Carolina and our 4 different regions. Our vocabulary: topography, region, tidewater, sounds, inlets, the barrier islands, we call them the Outer Banks in North Carolina, coastal plain, sand hills, Piedmont, red clay, mountains, and coves. By the end of this episode, I want you to understand 2 things. The way the land is, the physical features of each region affect who the people are and what their cultural values are. And so our traditions in our cultures come from the way we use the land and where we live. The regions also, of course, create our economic industries. If you're near the ocean, you're going to have bigger fishing industries. If you're in the mountains, you're going to have to depend on other things to make money and add to the economy. So remember, in our last episode, we learned about the 4 regions of North Carolina. They are the Tidewater, which is all the way next to the Atlantic Ocean in the east, the coastal plain, that's our best farming. We've got the Piedmont, which translates to foothills or small hills, and then you've got the mountains. Remember, we learned in our last episode that the first migrants during the last ice age and earlier, about 14,000 years ago, came through the Appalachian Mountains into the region. So they would have spread from west to east. So the mountain region, the first region to be that people in North Carolina lived 14,000 years ago is our earliest evidence. The topography is, well, you can guess, full of mountains. The Appalachian Mountain chain, which goes from the north point of Georgia all the way into Canada. You've got the Blue Ridge, which you see here, the Smoky Mountains and Black Mountains. Obviously, they're not really blue. It's just how they look from a distance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Originally, you couldn't do a lot of major farming. Now they do have farms. For example, tobacco is a major industry there now. Traditionally, it was not. You could only farm in the valleys between the mountains, which are called coves. So traditionally, the biggest industries were gathering herbs and hunting, particularly ginseng, which was very popular in places like China and other parts of Asia, so that they would gather that and sell that. Tourism is huge because people come along the Blue Ridge Parkway to see the beautiful mountains. And Christmas tree farms. A lot of times we send our Christmas trees all over the country. Traditionally, one of the biggest tribes that we'll study is the Cherokee, famously from the Trail of Tears. The Piedmont, where we live now, the Piedmont does not have very good soil. It's filled with this red clay, which is exactly what it sounds like, really, really thick, moist, but not very good for farming, but very good for making pottery. In fact, one of the tribes that we'll look at is the Catawba. They had very famous for their pottery, and North Carolina still is quite known for its pottery industry. Also, the Piedmont, because it doesn't have good soil, you do have a lot of farms, but they're mostly dairy farms and pig farms. And so here's a dairy farm in North Carolina, and that's just a smiling cow, and you know, who wouldn't want to see a smiling cow? And of course, most of our major cities are in North Carolina. Here's, of course, Durham right there, but you've got a lot of major cities. Charlotte is our biggest city. You've got Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro. Some of our other cities are outside, but most of them are in the Piedmont. And then you've got a lot of major universities, which you've got, of course, Duke here in Durham. You've got UNC, you've got State. You've got all these great places for research. So you have the Research Triangle Park, and that brings a lot of money to the state of research. And then, of course, NASCAR out in Charlotte. That brings a lot of tourism, too. Then you've got, next is the coastal plain. That's got the best soil in the state. Here's a tobacco farm, so maybe not the best product for health, but it traditionally has made a lot of money. Even though most of the farms are in the coastal plain, farming is still the #1 economic industry in North Carolina. Now, randomly, you have what these things called sandhills, which you can sort of see at the bottom. It's just these random parts of dry, sandy soil, which obviously you can't farm in. So instead, we use them for military training. There's a lot of major military places and training centers in North Carolina, and golfing. For example, Pinehurst, which is really, really famous, those are on those sandhills and bring a lot of money to our economy. This traditionally, we think, was the ancient shoreline. So thousands of years ago, the Atlantic Ocean would have gone all the way to this, and that's what left these sandhills. And finally, you've got the tidewater. The tidewater is got our sounds, which are mixed bodies of salt and fresh water, and then the outer banks. The breaks into the outer banks are called inlets because they let the salt water in that mixes. This is, of course, the area that the Europeans would have first settled because they came by boat along the Atlantic Ocean. Actually, they would have gone down and up following the currents. The Gulf Stream runs here, but the first English settlement was on Roanoke Island. There used to be an inlet there, Roanoke Inlet. It no longer exists, but you've got lots of tribes that there, like the Roanoke and the Croatoan. All right, thanks for watching.